Chris Watkin here, joined by Peter Rollings, who is the ex-MD of both Foxtons and Marsh Parsons. Peter, today I want to talk to you about estate agents and being tough on their fees, getting the fees they deserve. Talk to me.
Well, it's one of my big things I've banged on about forever. And obviously at Foxtons, we were famous for having tough fees.
2.5%?
2.5 and 3. We were actually 2.5 sold, 3 multiple. But obviously we did our 0%. So that's again my view. If you want to do an offer, you can't have 0.5% or anything apart from nothing or everything, because anything in the middle is down and dirty and cheap and naff. So that's the key.
I mean, why do you, talking about 0%, why do you think Foxtons still, I seem to be very good at that one, but there's plenty of other agents that go into a new town with 0% and they ball out?
Because they're not well known enough.
You need the both. You need the brand recognition as well as the...
Well, we didn't to begin with. The first time we did it at Foxtons was in 1985 when we were it was a second office in Fulham.
Whose idea was it?
It was a guy called Andrew Wildblood. Believe it or not, it wasn't John's idea. It was a guy called Andrew Wildblood. He claims it anyway. Who was my boss in Fulham? Great guy. But it was, it was incredibly effective.
Okay, but coming back to the original question about being tough on fees, why do you think agents, if you read all the surveys, your home buyers survey, which Peter Knight puts out through the Property Academy, fees tends to be, out of like the 6th or 7th or 8th consideration. Mm-hmm. But you talk to an agent, and as soon as they see, they're pulling their pants down.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's a massive issue. My financial controller said to me at Marsh Parsons, he said, because everyone always wants to cut fees. You have to have someone up there, and it was usually me, to say, no, you're not going to do it. Go and fight for it. Easy for me to say, perhaps some difficult for them to do. But my financial director actually said to me, he said, Pete, if you cut your fees from 2 to 1.5%, you have to sell 33% more property just to stay still. So my view was, I don't want the cautious savers who are going to choose me just for my fees. They're usually a pain in the arse to deal with. The properties are not particularly easy to sell, potentially. So I'm going to go after the people that really want me for me, and or me for my business, for Marsh Parsons or Foxtons. And that comes with a mixture of all sorts of things. Branding, it doesn't come overnight. It comes from being a really good estate agent, not just one of the crowd. Because if you're just one of the crowd, you should be charging
that's
less.
Easy to say if you're in Marsh Parsons and you've been in the town forever. But if you had a greenfield site, no one knew who Marsh Parsons were.
True, but you won't be able to get those super fees for a period of time. And during that period of time, you are going to really build your brand. And building a brand doesn't mean spending shitloads on marketing. It means doing things really, really well and properly, and making sure that the whole package is fantastic. I.e., it's like walking into a newly modernised house and they haven't replaced the door handles. That's the first thing you mention. You see, so you have to, everything has to tie into a brilliant business.
And does that have to come from the top?
Yeah, has to be absolutely enforced from the top. From the way the phone's answered, to the way you dress, from the way you welcome people, to the way you pick up people.
Do you think most estate agency bosses police that or monitor that?
No. Well, I have no idea. I did. Religiously, ridiculously.
My understanding is that you would go to every branch every week.
Yeah. Yeah. I did some crazy stuff. I proofread every single advert that went out. I did it in the evenings, because the thought of something going out with a typo in it fills me with complete horror.
Is that because you're a perfectionist as well?
Potentially. I just think it looks like crap. And the not putting an initial in someone's name if you're writing them a letter. Obviously we've got emails these days, but in my days we were doing letters, and if I get a letter, Mr. Rollings, and they haven't even bothered to find out that my initial is P, I'm already thinking these guys don't really care. They're just sort of doing it.
So you need strong wills, that's the fee, or don't bother coming back, but also at the same time create a culture and a service that people go, wow.
Yeah, and it has to go hand in hand. I'm not saying it's easy, by the way. It was relatively easy in London because people are time poor and cash rich. And the further you get out of London, it's much more difficult. But I remember employing someone. It was in the Balham office, and I employed him as a manager, which was very rare, but I did. And he said to me, Peter, it's really refreshing and empowering to be told by you that I can't cut my fees. Means you tell an agent that they can cut their fees, and they will.
The first thing they'll do is...
Of course. So you just say, no, you can't. No, go fight for it.
And then you're big on accountability. You would basically have a once a month meeting with all the staff in one room, and you would have to go through the fees and everything, would they?
Yep. Not the managers. Funny enough, I did that to begin with. The managers had to shout out what they did, and the last thing you want to do is to make a manager look small or not very good, because all their team are going to say, well, this manager over here is good and mine's not very good.
Yep.
So I stopped that very, very quickly. But I would meet with them individually and see what's going on.
So your group meeting, which we talked about in your story, check it out on the YouTube channel. You got all the negs in.
Yeah. And managers, but the managers didn't have to shout out their numbers. The negs
numbers
did.
But did you get all the
individually?
Managers, but did you get the managers into the room at one time?
Well, it wouldn't be. I mean, yes is the answer, but it wouldn't be the big company meeting. The big company meeting was shouting out all the numbers. But it was managers and negs, but the managers wouldn't shout out numbers because they're not negging. They're just valuing.
But if you think about it, if the negs are pulling their weight and doing the numbers, the figures should follow through to the office anyway.
Of course. Yeah.
Do you think agents focus too much on the office and not necessarily on the negs when it comes to numbers?
Well, I suppose so, but the negs won't be able to do the numbers unless the manager is getting the instructions for them to do the numbers. So it's like a virtuous circle. True. The manager has to be effective. I've got rid of lots of managers in my time because they're not effective. They're not getting the instructions because they're sloppy or not very good or too nice, usually too nice. And they just want to please everyone the whole time. You have to go and fight for fees. You've got to say no.
Can that be trained?
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, yeah.
How do you train?
Well, you've got to toughen people up. You've got to tell them to say no. No is a difficult thing to say. It's a very, very difficult thing to say.
Especially if you're dealing with people who are estate agents who are people pleasers.
Exactly. So it's down to me or at Marsh Parsons, Lisa Jane, to say no. Go and fight for it. No, you can't. The only way they could reduce a fee was to call me or Lisa Jane. And we wouldn't just say, oh, okay then. Now, if it was a sort of £3 or £4 or £5 million house, then we might do it for 2 or 1.75.
How very magnanimous.
I know, that's true. But we wouldn't be completely stupid about it. But we firmly believed that we were better than anybody else,
and therefore it comes from the top.
Yeah.
And if you're pulling your pants down, blame yourself, not your valuers.
Yeah. Absolutely, and you've got to go and sit with the valuer. We had Repit at M&P, and I got an email via Repit of every single instruction and every single sale. So I used to get sort of 300 emails a day from Repit, and I just go through them and say, yep, easy. Oh, hold on, this should be 2.5. It's 2. What's going on?
Accountability. Mm-hmm. Look at your numbers.
Yep.
Lead from the top.
Mm-hmm.
You heard it here first. Don't blame your valuer, blame yourself.
Oh, there's no such thing as a bad employee, it's only a bad boss.
Thank you for your insight today, Peter. Thank you.
Pleasure.